Welcome back to the JS Rock Reviews YouTube channel for another worst to best countdown. And today I'm going to be talking about one of the most controversial discographies in all of rock and metal, Metallica. I recently just did this discography with a bunch of people on the Rock and Metal Combat Facebook page. Every week, a guy named Ryan Russell posts a band and he asks everyone to rank their entire discography, and then at the end of the week, he makes an overall list of what everyone on the page thinks the worst to best of the discography is. And a couple of weeks ago, he did Metallica, which gave me the idea for this worst to best countdown. I really like a lot of Metallica's albums, and a lot of people have different opinions of certain albums they've released. A lot of people hate a lot of stuff that after the 80s. I like a couple things after the 80s, but overall I agree with a lot of people. So I'm going to get into my worst to best Metallica albums, starting off with their worst album, Saint Anger. No surprise here. I'm not counting Lulu. I don't think it's a real Metallica album. If it is, it'd be on the bottom of my list below Saint Anger, but I'm not counting it. So Saint Anger is on the bottom of my list. I just think they really tried to get back to metal. They did. I just think they went a little too grungy and industrial on it. I really do think that the production was absolutely horrible. The drums sound like everyone's been saying for 10 years. Absolutely sucked. It sounded like he was banging on garbage cans for the entire album. The songwriting was pretty boring, even more boring than half of the stuff on Load and Reload, which is boring to begin with. But Saint Anger is definitely by far Metallica's worst album. The next one I would say would be Reload, which would be the album that came directly before Saint Anger. I'm not putting Garage Inc. on this list because it's a covers album. I'm only counting studio albums here. So yeah, Reload. Other than a couple of the songs on it, I don't like anything off Saint Anger, really. Other than a couple songs on Reload, I really don't like Reload much either. I like Fuel, I like Memory Remains, and I like a couple other songs, but to get two albums in a row that have 13 and 14 songs on it is just absolutely way too much for 2 years in a row. It's just Metallica trying to put so many songs to fill up a CD. It's so uninspired and boring that half these songs would be rejects in the 80s. This Reload just a horrendous album. Next up would be Load. I don't think this one's very good either. I like more than I like Reload. I do like about half of this album, and I like about a quarter of Reload. But overall, the same things I said about Reload are what I think about this album. They very much go hand in hand together. I don't think that they're really worth much of anything. If they weren't in the $5 bin at Walmart, I never would have bought them, because having listened to them before, I really didn't want to spend that much money on them. That's about all they're worth. I would never pay full release price for either of these albums. Next up would be Death Magnetic. Probably the first attempt to go back to their older sound. I don't think it really succeeded that well. It has some good songs on it, much better songs than on any of the three previous albums I just talked about, but it's still not that great of an album. I don't think they've gotten back to the sound that they had in the 80s until their most recent album, which is coming up on the list. But Death Magnetic was a lot better than the Loads and Saint Anger, but it still wasn't back to that sound yet. So up next on my list would be And Justice for All, their worst of their classic era albums. I really do think that this album is not that good, other than Blackened, One, Harvester of Sorrow, and Dyer's Eve. I love Blackened and One, and I like Harvester of Sorrow and Dyer's Eve, but other than that, it's not a very good album. They went 3 for 3 on their first 3 albums, and then this was really the falling off point, and then they changed their sound for the next album. But I think this is their last true thrash album until their most recent album, and it's by far their worst of the thrashy albums that they've released of their career. So up next, we're now getting into my top 5 Metallica albums. At number 5 would be the most recent one, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I think this is an absolutely fantastic album. This is when we get to the albums that I really, really like. The first CD alone is absolutely amazing. It's the best stuff they've released since Master of Puppets, really. As a whole, it's those songs. If it was just CD1 and then Spit Out the Bone from CD2, it would be in my top 3 Metallica albums. But some of the stuff at the beginning of Disc 2 isn't quite as good as the stuff on Disc 1, so it drags it down a little bit. Otherwise, it would definitely be up there. But overall, even with those songs I don't really like, it's still a fantastic album and really a return to form we've been waiting almost 30 years to hear. It's just such a great album, and I've been listening to it a good couple times since it came out, and it'll definitely warrant some repeat listenings. Number 4 on my list would be the one that everyone would put a lot lower than me, the Black Album. I really do love this album. I love or like every single song off this album, which is horrendous to a lot of Metallica fans. Um, Even the songs that I don't love, I still really like. The Unforgiven. It's not my favorite song on the album, but I don't hate it. I don't hate Nothing Else Matters. The last 2 songs on the album, The Struggle Within and My Friend of Misery, they're not that good, but they're nowhere near as bad as some of the stuff I talked about earlier. Even those 2 songs I don't like make Load and Reload sound even worse. Um, so yeah, my number 4 is the Black Album. I absolutely love songs like Don't Tread on Me, Through the Never, Wherever I May Roam, Sad But True, Of Wolf and Man. Those are some of my favorite Metallica songs of all time. But yeah, I really do love the Black Album. I don't get why everyone completely shits all over the album. It's not that bad of an album. I love it. My number 3 would be the debut, Kill 'Em All. I appreciate. I think it's in my top 3 because I just appreciate the thrashiness of the album. It goes together as an album very well. It's a good listen through the whole album. But not a lot of my favorite Metallica songs are on Kill 'Em All. I think it's weird. I can only listen to Kill 'Em All as an album. I can't really pick out 1 or 2 songs and just listen to those songs. I have to listen to the whole album. It's the only Metallica album where it's like that. I have to listen to the whole album. I just can't pick certain songs to listen to. Um, I love Whiplash. I love a lot of the songs on the album. They're not in my top 20 Metallica songs like the songs on the Black Album or on my top 2 albums. So yeah, I love Kill 'Em All, but I love it as an album and not necessarily because of the songs on it in their own right. I just think it's a great flow of an album, and that's why it's in my top 3. At number 2 is their second album, Ride the Lightning. Amazing, amazing album, even better than Kill 'Em All. I just think this one is their first 3 albums are great to listen to as albums, as is the Black Album, but with this one, unlike Kill 'Em All, I can listen to a lot of the songs on their own. The title track, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I even like Escape. I know a lot of people would put Escape near the bottom of their list of Metallica songs. Even Metallica would put it on the bottom of the list because it was much more commercial than anything on Kill 'Em All, which, I mean, like, how could you not be more commercial than Kill 'Em All? Kill 'Em All was one of the most hardcore thrash albums of all time. So I still love Escape. I love stuff like Trapped Under Ice, Call of Cthulhu, Creeping Death, Fight Fire with Fire, all those songs. I just love that especially this album and Master of Puppets are just 8 songs and done, and just the best 8 songs you can write, and just a concise, quick album to listen to. It's just such a thrill to listen to the album as a whole. And then that would bring me to my number 1, which is Master of Puppets, Metallica's all-time best album. This album is just so cutthroat. It never lets you down. It just keeps going and going and going. It never rests. It never slows down at all. It just opens with Battery. There's that intro. You're thinking, okay, this is a little different, and then it goes into the main riff, and it's back to the Kill 'Em All thrash. Then goes into the title track, which is just as heavy as Battery. The Thing That Should Not Be, so sludge and heavy. It's just such a great song. And then what people could call the ballad of the album, which isn't even a ballad. How can you call that a ballad? Welcome Home Sanitarium. It's such a heavy song. Even something that heavy is great. It reminds me of something like Fade to Black, which is probably one of my favorite songs on Ride the Lightning. It's just a great song. Then it goes into Disposable Heroes, Leper Messiah, Orion, Damage Incorporated. Those four songs are some of the most underrated songs in the history of thrash. Just that group of four is very. I just think the grouping of the songs, the first four songs and the last four songs, go so well together in their groups of four. To listen to it on like vinyl would be amazing. Just to listen to the first four songs as a group, flip the album over and listen to the last four songs. I think it's two very, very well put together groups of songs, and that is why Master Puppets is one of my favorite metal albums of all time. It's just a great, great lineup of songs. There's no clunker on the album. Everyone is just as great as the one that came before it. It's some of the best metal in history, and I think a lot of people could take a lot of lessons from an album like Master of Puppets. Write 8 songs, your best 8 songs. Just keep on chugging. Don't slow the album down, and it's a heavy metal masterpiece. So that is my list